Former senior Trump advisor Jason Miller was briefly detained in a Brazilian airport after traveling to the country to attend the Conservative Political Action Conference last week. Miller was attempting to board a plane back to the U.S. when he was pulled aside by officials and questioned for 3 hours.
Embattled President Jair Bolsonaro addressed Miller's detainment at a rally against Supreme Court Justice Alexander de Moraes, claiming that he just intercepted an American citizen to be questioned about anti-democratic acts, and directed the justice to, quote, stop oppressing the Brazilian people and stop censoring your people. Jason Miller joins us now to give us a firsthand account of what happened. Jason, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. So
Thank you so much for having me.
What exactly did happen?
Well, it's a little bit. I'm not sure if it's Keystone Cops or just when judiciaries run amok, but was in Brazil for CPAC Brazil, which was another excellent production put together by the ACU, American Conservative Union, in partnership with local conservative Brazilian think tank, invited to speak, talk about Getter, the new social media platform that I'm the CEO of, where we're already at 2 million people in the first 2 months and about 300,000 or so already in Brazil, our number 2 country. And everything was great, excellent trip, had a chance to meet the president. As we go to the airport, go through the metal detectors, and they're the plainclothes police asking us to follow them to a federal detention room for questioning.
And what do they ask you about? And how long were you there?
So the beginning of the 3-hour ordeal, we came walking and sat down, and they put some document in front of me saying that at the direction of the Supreme Court of Brazil, we want to ask you some questions. What I now know that I did not know prior to the trip is that a Supreme Court justice in Brazil, imagine this, effectively is the chief prosecutor and for cases as well as hearing them. So imagine Sonia Sotomayor, Adam Schiff, Merrick Garland, Jim Comey, and Bob Mueller all rolled up into one, and that is a Supreme Court justice. So what they wanted to ask questions about is why I was in Brazil, which of course I was there for Brazil CPAC. They wanted to know who I work for, and I said, well, as publicly identified, I'm the CEO of Getter, a free speech company and platform, and hopefully you have your own account signed up. And then they also wanted to know, and this is where it started getting a little bit tricky, they wanted to know everyone who I'd met with, and they wanted to know everyone who was helping us to talk about Getter in the country of Brazil. And they wanted me to list out the names, at which point I said, I want to get a lawyer and let's involve the embassy. Because clearly what was going on here is they also said that this was all part of 2 secret investigations that the Brazil Supreme Court was looking into. And hold on, guys, I asked, well, what are the 2 secret investigations? And they said, they're secret, we can't tell you. I was like, come on. And like, guys, you got to help me. And here's the other thing that I got to tell you. This is where it was all pretty clearly a political brushback pitch led by the chief Supreme Court, signed by one Supreme Court justice who kind of, by the way, looks like a Bond villain, this Alexander de Moraes character. And I said, well, who here speaks English? Because none of the plainclothes police officers spoke English. And of course, my Portuguese is non-existent. So they pulled in the baggage handler, the lady who was helping us go through customs and to load our bags, yellow reflective vest and everything to be the translator, in which case, look, I haven't finished all 20 seasons of Law and Order, but I know that this is rinky-dink when you see it.
And so actually the way that they roll the prosecutorial powers up into the judicial role is that's how Lula da Silva got railroaded into prison as well. He's now out and running against Bolsonaro. But Jason, I want to get your take on there seem to be a lot of links between Bolsonaro's political element, political circle, and Trump's political circle. Are there people within the Trump world who worry about Bolsonaro's more explicit rejection of democratic institutions, or is that more a feature than a bug of the relationship between the 2 different circles?
I would say that they're not overlapping circles. I think they're completely different circles. President Bolsonaro, who I had a chance to spend some time with at the presidential palace, as well as his sons Eduardo and Flavio. One's a congressman, one's a senator. Are completely separate, completely different from President Trump. One of the things that I noticed too when I was in Brazil, imagine one of the things I think we take for granted here in the U.S. is diversity in media. And you might have on the left, you might have an MSNBC. On the right, you might have a Fox News. Obviously, you have Hill TV, which I think does a good job of being very centrist and playing it pretty straight. But imagine having only one side of the spectrum in Brazil. But even in the run-up to September 7th, their Independence Day, it was around-the-clock news about how there would be crazy riots and protests, and the whole country you would think would have been on fire. They had 1 million people in Brasilia, 3 or 4 million in Sao Paulo, and 2 or 3 million in Rio, and it was all very peaceful. It was all their Independence Day celebrations. So the media portrayal of President Bolsonaro and what actually happens, I found to be two completely different things.
I actually learned a little bit about this because the Intercept launched a sister publication down in Brazil called the Intercept Brazil. And the concentration of media there is like 1980s, 1990s era U.S. And it really allowed the TI Brazil to become a huge player on the left down there. In a way, the Intercept in the United States is a significant media outlet, but it's not dominant. And TI Brazil, because of the kind of monoculture around the media there, is able to exercise an extraordinary amount of influence there because there's very little alternative media, and it was striking. What kind of right-wing media apparatus is there? I know some of the kind of consolidated media, leans to the right, but is there a more kind of explicit, like Breitbart, OAN type media environment down there?
Not in the same way that you have in the United States. I think there are some burgeoning YouTube platforms that are growing, some YouTube shows, which, by the way, everybody is very concerned about being deplatformed or kicked off as both the big tech companies and the government starts to exercise certain controls. You have some online, but not nearly as much. And so one of the things I really learned and have a new appreciation for is that free speech really isn't all that free. There's some of these universal concerns about the overreach of big tech, about 3 billionaires in Silicon Valley dictating free speech rights, about the concern of an overreaching government. One of the things I learned is that Brazil doesn't have their version of a First Amendment, something that protects the right to free speech. In fact, I met with a congresswoman in Brazil who's actually authoring that and introducing it in Brazil's Congress, and that just kind of blew my mind that Brazil, a large democracy in our own hemisphere, doesn't actually have the free speech in their constitution the way that we do.
Yeah, nor does any European countries either.
Right. Who's championing that? You say you met with someone who is trying to bring that forward. Is there opposition to something so basic like free speech, like a First Amendment? Is there, this should be bipartisan, it seems to me.
You would think so. So it's Deputy Carol Detoni who is leading that effort in Brazil's Congress. I don't admittedly know enough about Brazil's legislature to know who all is entirely for it, who entirely is against it. It does seem like a bit of a no-brainer. But one of I was very happy with the meeting because the deputy was willing to join Getter. And we actually ended up having about 100,000 people from Brazil join the platform last week. And as I joked to one of the people in the office, if I knew that my being in detention for 3 hours would lead to 100,000 new signups in the country, I would have stayed for 6.
Real quickly, can I ask you about, you just said that you're concerned about people being deplatformed on big tech sites. Does your site make a guarantee that it won't take down content or kick users off for any reason?
Yeah, a really important point. I'm glad that you bring this up. So what's different from us and some of the other, I guess you'd say, upstart social media platforms is from day one, we've had a robust and proactive moderation policy. And what that means is we work with both the AI component and human moderators to make sure that whether it be ISIS-type imagery or pornography or anything that pushes illegal behavior or threatening behavior, that's not allowed on our platform. That's not free speech. That's not political debate. But what our pledge, our value proposition is that nobody will ever be censored or deplatformed or shadow banned or any of that nonsense for expressing their political beliefs. That's the difference, and we need to make sure it's a safe platform. And I think that's the reason why we've been able to work so well with a number of the the platforms or the folks who we're currently working with, and we do have redundancies in case somebody decided to change their mind. But we do take this serious. I take this very serious that we're not going to put up with any illegal behavior or racial or religious epithets or things of that nature. And that's not anything that anyone's ever pushed back on. Nobody's ever came back and said, I want to have violent beheadings or I want to have pornography on this site. People want free speech, and they want to know that whether it's Big Brother from big tech or the government is going to come and kneecap them.
But although
is Amazon your provider? I just have to ask you.
Yeah, so currently working with Amazon, we do have redundancies in place. There's a reason why Amazon is the biggest. It's quite frankly because they're the best. But since we have had a moderation policy from day one, I think we've been a good partner so far.
But these can be tough questions, though, because revolution is a form of politics. Revolutions are violent. So what if somebody's political viewpoint is advocating for violent revolution? Where on the spectrum is it is it acceptable to advocate for something like that? Which somebody would say, well, a lot of the founding fathers would be banned from platforms for advocating what eventually birthed this nation.
That's another good question. Typically, one's free speech rights extend up until the part where they start to infringe on somebody else's rights, or to where they start to commit or insinuate or push for illegal behavior. So just in the same way that the courts have ruled that you cannot walk into a crowded theater and yell fire, if you're threatening violence or threatening to do some kind of unlawful activity, just the same way that you can't walk into a restaurant and threaten someone physically. I mean, first and foremost, you might end up with a knuckle sandwich yourself, but there will be legal ramifications. And in the digital town square, where we want to have this environment for people to have their political views, you can't go and threaten illegal behavior. That's typically the line. Now, it's as far as on specific words or in specific phrases. Obviously, that's on a case-by-case basis. I don't want to give any broad generalities, but we do not allow, definitely do not allow any sort of violent threats or violent behavior. That's something that's not allowed on our platform.
Yeah, I guess the point is that sometimes these can be difficult calls, and calls are made wrong on both sides, and that's something that larger tech companies struggle with. So it's always interesting to kind of probe people for where they draw the line.
Yeah, and I would say here, I'd just say real quick, look, and this is something that I think I have a new appreciation for how difficult this can be. Like I said, in addition to the AI component, we have a human review team that goes through to make sure things are in the right context. For example, we had a gentleman whose photo was flagged where he had something like 14 sandwiches stacked on top of each other with a fork in one hand and a knife on the other, with his face covered up, and it was flagged. And we had a whole meeting to say, why was this flagged? Clearly, the gentleman just wanted a 14-decker sandwich, but it had a knife in the image. And so we sat down and said, okay, we actually went through, and there are like 6 different variations of knives, such as a knife to the throat, someone holding a knife, someone showing a knife. So there are all sorts of different things, and that's why we have the human review team to make sure that we're getting it right. We're not going to get it right 100% of the time. Of course, that's our goal.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, thank you guys very much.
And we'll be back with more Rising right after this.